I'll now take the sediment for the Planning Local Review Body by roll call. The following members are present: Councillors Alec Allison, Maureen Devlin, Isabel Dorman, Mark Horsham. I have apologies from Councillor Anne LeBlond. Councillors David McLaughlin and Graham Scott are present. I have apologies from Councillor Shearer, and Councillor Jim Mortot is present. I've also taken a note of the officers present, and I will now hand you back to the Chair for today's business. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Do we have any declarations of interest? Item 2, the minutes of previous meeting submitted for approval as a correct record in pages 3 to 4. Can we agree the minutes?
Agreed, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, review of case in terms of planning applications P21 0959 in pages 5 to 62. An item before us today is a notice review from Mr. Gordon Hope. The applicant is asking the PLRB to review the planning officer's determination to refuse an application for planning permission for the erection of a front extension with associated alterations at 9 George Allen Place, Straven. Before the planning advisor describes the background to the review before us today, I understand that the committee clerk, Stuart, has received a late representation from the applicant. Stuart, can the advisor review body of this, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As stated at paragraph 6.2 of the report, the applicant has submitted comments that were received out with the specified period in terms of the Town and Country Planning Schemes of Delegation and Local Review Procedure, Scotland Regulations 2013. I would add that the period for receiving comments in the Planning Officer's Statement of Observations had already passed prior to the applicant advising that he was no longer being represented by the agent, so there was no opportunity for me to advise the applicant of the deadline before it had passed. The applicant has sent a covering letter along with his comments, which states that his agent received an email on 1st November regarding the review by the PLRB and advised him that the proposal was dead and buried. I would add that this email sent to the agent on 1 November was from myself enclosing the Statement of Observations and advising that he was entitled to submit comments to the PLRB. The letter further states that following this and after the agent had stopped acting on the applicant's behalf, a planning officer attended the applicant's property to take photographs for the review and, when asked, had advised the applicant that, as far as she was aware, the review had still to take place. On further inquiry with myself, I confirmed to the applicant that the PLRB had still to consider the review, and subsequently the applicant has submitted his comments for the PLRB. During discussion with the applicant, I also advised that the deadline in terms of the regulations had passed, and that if he submitted comments, it would be a matter for the PLRB to decide if they would be considered as part of the review. I will now invite the legal advisor to provide any comments she has before members consider the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. It was just really to give a background to members to the legal position relating to the consideration of a late submission. As Stuart has advised in terms of the regulations that govern the procedures, sorry, for the LRB, the 2013 regulations, there is no provision which affords the LRB discretion in allowing the applicant to submit late comments. However, as members will be aware, any decision of the PLRB is challengeable by judicial review. A ground of challenge under judicial review is where there's been a breach of natural justice. One of the limbs of natural justice is the right to a fair hearing. Consequently, in making its decision today as to whether or not the representation lodged late by the applicant should be considered, the LRB should balance the procedural requirements against the applicant's right to be heard and consider whether the circumstances surrounding the late submission meet the tests in relation to natural justice and whether or not they merit the consideration of the late representation. I would also draw attention the LRB's attention to the fact that there are no other interested parties that need to be considered in relation to this application. And that's all.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Monica. Any comments from anyone? Councillor Alison?
Just to say I'm quite happy for that information to be included.
I'll agree with that.
Same. Yeah, I think that would be fair.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're all in agreement then, are we? Everyone like-minded? Quite happy for it to be accepted?
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, in that case, the comments will be shared via the chat facility and also emailed to members just now. There is only just over 2 sides of A4, so it shouldn't take too long to read through. The document is now available in the chat facility. Yeah, can I just check if members are happy, if I've enough time to read through that submission before we proceed?
Yes.
Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah.
Okay, if we're content, the planning advisor will now describe the background to this request for review to members. Thank you, Gwen.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant seeks detailed planning consent for the erection of a front extension to an existing single-storey detached house at 9 George Allen Place in Straven. The application site is located within an established residential area. It's within a cul-de-sac positioned on the southern side adjacent to the street's turning head. The property is set back within the site with a large front garden, 9.3 metres at its longest point, and a garage to the rear of the site. The proposed extension would project approximately 2.5 metres from the original front building line, and the new roof would extend the height of the property at the front from 3.6 metres to 5.7 metres. The proposed extension would provide a larger lounge and bedroom and an access with steps and a handrail at the front of the property into the lounge. In terms of consultation, there were no statutory consultees required for the assessment of this type of planning application. Statutory neighbour notification was carried out and no letters of representation were received. The policies in the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2 to make the PLRB aware of today are policies 3.5, DM1 and DM2. In summary, the policies advise the following. Policy 3, General Urban Areas and Settlements, that within the urban areas and settlements, residential developments on appropriate sites will generally be acceptable. Proposals for uses that are ancillary to residential areas will be assessed on their individual merits, with particular regard to their effect on the amenity and character of the area. Particular consideration will be given to likely impacts on the amenity of the area. This will include locally important green space, local services and facilities, proposed servicing, parking arrangements and access. Developments which would be detrimental to the amenity of residents in the wider community or to the character of the surrounding area will not be permitted. Policy 5, Development Management and Placemaking, advises that all proposals require to be well designed and integrated with the local area. Proposals should have no unacceptable significant adverse impacts on the local community and the environment. Policy DM1, Design. This advises that new development must promote quality and sustainability in its design and layout and should enhance or make a positive contribution to the character and appearance of the urban or rural environment in which it is located. And finally, Policy DM2, House Extensions and Alterations, requires proposals to adhere to the following criteria. 1. The siting, form, scale, design and materials respect the character of the existing dwelling and the wider area. Within this context, high quality, innovative design will be encouraged where it complements the character of the building and its surroundings. 2. It does not dominate or overwhelm the existing dwelling, neighbouring properties or street scene in terms of size, scale or height. 3. It does not significantly adversely affect adjacent properties in terms of overlooking or loss of privacy, daylight or sunlight. 4. It retains adequate car parking, usable garden ground and bin storage within the site. And 5. It does not have an adverse impact on traffic or public safety. It is these policies that provide the development plan basis for considering the application. Finally, Chair, the review body should note that the appellant considers that a site inspection would be of assistance to the review body.
Thank you, Gwen. The next point for the PLRB to consider and decide is how to proceed with the review. The applicant has indicated, as Gwen says, that a site inspection would be of assistance to the review body. Taking account of what is in their papers, we have to decide if they do in fact contain sufficient information for us to determine the review today, or if we need more written information, a hearing or a visit to the site. I think all the information that we have, plus the detailed photographs we have for the site, does provide us with all we need to consider this review. Either a site visit, a hearing or further written submissions. Anyone get any comments? Are you happy to proceed?
Yeah, I think we have enough, Chair. I think we have enough.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Okay, happy to proceed?
Agree.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up for discussion then in this review. Councillor Wardle?
Yeah, I've got a lot of difficulty with this one in the sense that, what we're really talking about here, the reasons for refusal are largely they're subjective, and when you get to the situation where it's based on, a subjective view, it does become difficult. The fact that the additional information we got this morning seems to indicate that, none of the neighbours have any problem with it. That just makes it a wee bit more difficult for me. I'm inclined actually to in this case to probably uphold the appeal by the gentleman, but I'd like to hear what other people have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I take on board what Councillor Wardle says, and before, again, I think there's my own personal view is that, this, you could go either way on this, and what I want to ask Gwen about, if it's okay to ask Gwen to supply some more information. If you look at the pack of the papers, page 22, it's the original report by the planning officer for the refusal, and it's 1.3. And it's saying that there's obviously going to be an extension out the way of 2.5 metres from the original front of the building, and that the height of the property will extend from 3.6 metres to 5.7 metres. That's 2.1 metres. That's not far short of 7 feet in height. The question I've got, and I was looking through the rest of the papers, and in page 52, 53, the actual plans that have been submitted by the applicant. Is this another floor to a bungalow? I'm not trying. If my question appears facetious, I'll apologise. But is this a street full of bungalows, and he's adding a floor, turning it from a bungalow into a two-story detached? If Gwen can sort of add to that.
Yes, Councillor Scott, it is a single story property, and I think ultimately how the report was written up was trying to put across the fact, if you look at the front of the property, it's got a ridge that is horizontal, parallel, the roof ridge is parallel to the street, but with the front extension going on, there's a new ridge that's going to be perpendicular to the street, so the front elevation is going to be flat. I don't know if you could go to, what page is that on? It'll be on page
52 and 53 are all
yeah. If you look at the page with the proposed front elevation.
But the point I'm trying to make, Gwen, is it's not an extra floor.
No, it's not, no.
So it's just, he's extending the height of the house by just approximately 7 feet, which means it'll be clearly be the tallest building in the street.
Well, no, the overall height will be no higher than the existing ridge line of the property. But as it's because if you look at the front elevation of the existing house at the moment, the front wall to the eaves would be the 3.6 up to the eaves, and then there is a wee projection up above when the lounge window. But when the proposed extension, if it was to be constructed, the front wall is going to extend all the way up to the ridge point of the extension of the new extension. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. Can I just, one last supplementary here. Thanks for indulging me. I'm starting to fall in line with Councillor Wardle here. If the 2.1 metres, as you say, the ridge line and the height is not going to be nearly 7 feet bigger than it currently is in terms of the visual impact to the street, then where's the so-called harm in doing this? Whereas I think if I look at the reasons for refusal, adopted beyond the existing forward building line, and the projection of the extension at this location would detract from the established character of the surrounding built environment. If it's not going to appear that much bigger, then why is it detracting from the current environment? It's just if you can explain that to me, then obviously it'll be helpful in adjudicating in this case. Thank you, Chair. Thanks for indulging me.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thanks, Chair. That's sort of answered the question for me. The answer that Gwen gave to Graham Scott there. So, at the highest point of the existing property, the extension you're suggesting, Gwen, is going to be no higher than the existing highest point on that roof?
Yes, the extension will be no higher than the existing ridge line of the original house. There is underbuilding because of how the ground falls, but in terms of the proposed extension, it will be no higher than the height of the existing ridge line.
Supplementary, Chair. So one of my questions is going to be before Graham asked his, I take his point about whether it's a two-storey, but if there's going to be such a height difference, would there be level differences within the property? But I think that what you've just said there would suggest that there isn't going to be.
No, it'll be the same level throughout internally within the property. And if you look at the front elevation of the proposed extension, there's a proposed front access as part of the proposal, which will have steps up into the access into the lounge area to the front of the property.
And my final point, Chair, and I think it's the most important one, these are technicalities, but we have planning laws in place and rules, but because the friendly neighbours next door haven't objected, that doesn't mean to say that any future person who may move into those properties would be impacted by the fact that that property is extended out beyond its current line. Because someone doesn't have an objection doesn't mean to say that it should be granted. Just like if someone doesn't have an objection, it shouldn't be granted. Just the same way that if someone does have an objection, it doesn't mean to say that it should be refused. Planning applications to be granted or refused based on planning guidelines, not because no one objects to it. Because no one objects to it, it could well be that they're all very friendly up there and they don't want to cause any hassle. Because it might well be that from their point of view that they don't see any harm in it. But you know what happens when people object to a neighbour's extension going up? There goes the harmony within the street forevermore. It upsets people, it causes a lot of animosity in the area. So I'm not convinced that because the neighbours aren't objecting would suggest that we should go ahead and uphold the appeal. I really don't think we should be looking at it like that, and that's addressing the point that Jim Wardhaw made. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ellison.
Chair, I think I'm erring towards Jim's position. Looking at this, the house is sitting well back from the line, if you like, of houses. There are 2, 4, 5 in a stepped line. The neighbour in this one are sitting well back, so it's not protruding in front of the line. And if you look at the two houses further in, they have a gable end with a peak pointing out onto the road as well. There is a significant number of different house types there, and there is room. So I'm inclined, as Jim says, it is a matter of opinion in this one. I don't think it's black and white, and I'm inclined at the moment to agree that this can go ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Wardhaw.
Just in response to David's thing, I think future occupation, anybody buying a property in the street after it's been built will buy it in full knowledge of what's there. I don't think that's really something that's relevant in this case. And I think it's more important is the fact that it is a subjective view, and if the existing neighbours don't have a problem with it, then I wouldn't have a problem with it either.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any points you'd like to make?
Chair, if I can respond to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, certainly.
I get back to my point about we're sitting here making a judgment based on whether our planning officer did the right thing or not. And it's not like some of the technicality. I've been at situations before where there's been a roads issue or some other thing, but the planning officer have come up with that. They've done their job, basically. And according to the planning guidelines, it doesn't meet the criteria, regardless of objections or not. And I think we're doing a disservice to officials because they're employed to do a job, and they've done their job here. So, no, I hold my line, Chair. I think we should not uphold this appeal.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow on from my colleague, Councillor McLaughlin, in terms of the point about objections. The fact that there's no objections doesn't mean there's acquiescence in terms of the people in the street. How many times have we seen in the past where there's been no objections in a street, and then when something actually gets built, they turn around and go, "Oh, I didn't realise it would be like that." And then suddenly you get the stream of objections coming in after the thing is built. So, I mean, the fact that the cart and the horse could be the other way around doesn't mean anything. I take the point that at the end of the day, it's a judgment call from the officer who did the report. I understand, I've read the report in detail, the one from 22 up to 25, the original, the reason for refusal. It's logical that the decision was made. I wouldn't build all my hopes on the fact that there are no objections, because as I say, I wish I had £1 for every time there's been no objections. Then when something actually got built, lo and behold, I didn't think it would be like that, councillor. How many times have we heard that one? So it's a difficult one. I accept that you can make a case either way, but it's a judgment call. I'm inclined to stick with give the officer the benefit of the doubt on this one. It's a tough one. I take some of the points that Alec Allison and Jim Wardhaw have made, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't base my whole judgment on the fact that there's no objections. But it's a difficult one. Obviously, we'll wait and see. But yeah, on balance, I would probably support the officer in the original recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Sorry, I was still on mute there. I don't see any other hands at the moment. Can I summarise the points made? The application is for planning permission for the erection of a front extension with associated alterations at 9 George Allen Place, Straven. The adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2 identifies the site as being within a residential area. If we consider that the proposal would detract from the established character of the surrounding built environment and established streetscape, as well as have a significant adverse impact on visual amenity, it would not accord with policies 3, 5 and DM2 of the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2, then permission can be refused. Or if we consider that the proposed development would not have an adverse impact on the established character of the surrounding built environment and established streetscape, or have a significant adverse impact on visual amenity, we could grant planning consent subject to conditions. Our options are to uphold or reverse or vary the planning determination. Anyone else like to have any comments? Any further comments? So are we going to uphold the planning officer's determination?
Yeah.
Agreed.
I would uphold the appellants.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. If
Yeah, I would reject
going
the
against, I would
I would
second that.
reject the appeal.
Yeah. I'll second it, David.
Right, well, we'll have to go to a vote, Stuart.
Yep, Chair. So, sorry, I thought you had moved to uphold the decision,
Yes.
the Planning Officer's decision,
Yes.
and seconded by Councillor Horsham. Is that correct?
That's fine.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay, and Councillor Wardhaw proposed, seconded by Councillor Allison, that the decision to refuse planning permission be reversed.
Yes.
Okay, can you just clarify on what grounds?
On the grounds that the effect of the development wouldn't have an adverse effect on the streetscape or the environment.
Okay, so just to recap, given that Councillor Dorman was seconded by Councillor Horsham first, we'll take that as a motion. So that the motion is that the decision to refuse plan permission be upheld. And the amendment moved by Councillor Wardhaw and seconded by Councillor Allison is that the decision to refuse plan permission be reversed on the grounds that the effect of the development would not have an adverse effect on the streetscape and environment. So if you can just take it by roll call, please. Councillor Allison.
Amendment.
Councillor Devlin.
Motion.
Councillor Dorman.
Motion.
Councillor Horsham.
Motion.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Motion.
Councillor Scott.
Motion.
Councillor Wardhaw.
Amendment.
So 2 members voted in favour of the amendment and 5 members voted in favour of the motion. So therefore declare the motion carried.
Thank you, Stuart. As for the decision of the PLRB, sorry? Someone want
Sorry,
to speak
Chair, beg your pardon, I'll let you finish first.
The decision of PLRB is to refuse plan permission as we are satisfied that the proposed development would be contrary to policies 3, 5 and DM2 of the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2. The next stage is that a written decision notice will be issued by the PLRB and this should be issued within 28 days. You want to come in, Councillor McLaughlin?
Chair, it was just the decision's made now and the argument's made and the case is finished. But we're here to do a job and we're here as members, local councillors, elected by our electorate to represent their best interests. But I sometimes wonder about the validity of deciding to overturn a recommendation or a decision previously made under delegated powers by planning officers based on the current guidelines that they have to work with. It just makes me feel very uncomfortable when you're asked to cast doubt over a professional's opinion. It makes me question, why do we have this department in place? However, I've sat on appeals, I've sat on these before where we have upheld the appeal. And there was one in particular where the planning fairly recently, and I remember it fairly recently in August, I think it was, where there was no issue with planning. There was a technicality with roads of the width of an existing driveway, but that was rejected by members who were proposing to uphold this appeal today. It just, my mind boggles at times with members and some of the decisions and the questions and the comments that they put forward. Chair, that's all I want to say. I would love it if we had some parity here. Things go, because we're not here to question Gwen or Monica. We're here to put a bit of, as the public would see it, a bit of common sense to something. And when you look at the streetscape, that a 2.5 metre extension would bring that the front of that house way beyond the rest of that street line. And that's when you're going to build houses, you've got to stick to these things. You get planning consent for the house, then you want to say, well, hang on, let's build it a bit further out. Well, that's not real how it works. I'm sorry. But then somebody sits here and says, no, you've got that wrong, Gwen. Let's just go ahead with this. It just makes me feel a wee bit uncomfortable, Chair. And I know that's a wee rant. I'm maybe having a go at members here, and everybody's entitled to their opinion, of course. But it just disturbs me sometimes when there's no kind of regularity of members' views on this, on some of the decisions that we make here. Thanks, Chair.
Well, thanks for that. Councillor Watto?
Just say, I think we're agreed it is a matter of opinion, and I don't take it as a criticism of the officer. Opinions vary. Davy's opinion might not be the same as mine, and I'm quite happy with the way we operate. I think that's why the appeals panel is here in the first place.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands, but just before we finish, I'd like to bring members' attention to the fact that this will be Gwen's last PLRB. So I'd like to thank Gwen very much for all your help and advice and assistance throughout the years, and I wish you all the very best in your new job. So thank you very much, Gwen. You'll be missed. Thank you.
Oh, thanks very much, Chair. Thank you. Yep.
What new job, Chair? Gwen, where are you going to?
Renfrewshire Council.
Get out of here.
Oh.
I am. No.
She's getting out of here, David. She's getting out of here. That's you got it in one, Davy. She's getting out of here.
Where's Renfrewshire?
I'm trying. I've still to plot that one out, but
a good question from Councillor Wardle. Why Renfrewshire?
It was a job opportunity for a promoted post. So
God,
congratulations.
Well deserved. Well deserved.
All the very best.
All the very best.
And thanks
we're just saying that we're trying to hold on to you because top class officers are difficult to get, and you've done such a great job.
I'm going now. That's it. I'm staying.
It's my natural charm. It does it. It's my.
So we'll see you in February, then.
I said, I know. But no, it's been great working with you all. I've really, really, really enjoyed my time at South Lanarkshire. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good Christmas, everyone.
Thank you.
Same to you.
You too, Gwen.
Well, thank you all very much for your attendance. I don't have any other urgent business that I'm aware of. So thank you all very much again. Take care. And I'll see some of you tomorrow. And the ones that I don't see, have a good Christmas and a good New Year. And all the best, Gwen.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chair.